Okay, so I'm here with Vlad, and I've been working with Vlad since August 22nd, so about 2 years and 2 months. And since then, we've done quite a bit of work together, both with coaching and psychedelic therapy and medicine work. And without going too much further into the details, I'm just going to let Vlad tell the story. So, Vlad, I want to start this conversation with you telling us, in your own words, who were you and what was your life like before we met and started working together?
Yeah. So first, thanks for the introduction. And the turning point for me that really comes to mind here is I think back to 2021 when I first uh, seeked out ketamine therapy back in Scottsdale, where I live. At the time, I'll give you some context. My then girlfriend had left to Germany to get her master's, and that absolutely destroyed me. In a lot of ways, I was quite depressive. I felt just so bad within my body and within my mind that for the first time in my life, or not really for the first time, but let's just say in a novel way, I pursued help for the very first time. Right. So I had some recreational ketamine experiences back in college, and I thought, hey, is this something that I can find to perhaps make my life better to improve my mental health? Uh, so I wasn't doing so well. I recall every few months I would have serious breakdowns where I would cry and feel very lonely and hopeless um, until I actually reached out for help at that point in time. And actually doing that, the reaching out for help was even difficult. I was afraid of being perceived as weak or that there's something wrong with me. I had this view of, oh, if I struggle with my mental health, that must be a fault with me. So that's how I felt before my very first, you could say, psychedelic experiences in order to improve my mental health.
So you were experiencing something along the lines of what you imagine to be depression, chiefly.
Yes, and looking back on it, it was kind of a bipolar thing. I would be high, I would be low. I I was really codependent in my relationship at the time. That was for sure. Um, and this is all actually quite interesting. If you looked at my life at that time from a third person perspective, I was objectively, whatever that means, doing quite well. I had a very well paying job. I had a seemingly fulfilling relationship. I was close with my girlfriend's family in Scottsdale. So I had people with me. I had pickleball. I had friends, some activities that I would do, but something really felt off. It's hard to describe looking back at it now because I don't feel that feeling anymore. But yeah, it was a depressive state that would kind of fluctuate.
And that's what activated your curiosity around ketamine therapy specifically.
Yeah. There I would have these low moments where I just felt absolutely awful. It wasn't so much a suicidality. It was this feeling of, man, I just wish I didn't feel like this. And the feeling was bad enough to make me say to myself, God, I almost feel like I'd rather be better off if I wasn't alive.
Hmm.
It was that kind of feeling. So yeah, that's what made me pursue ketamine therapy.
And were there any other sorts of habits or patterns in your life that didn't feel supportive?
Yeah, definitely looking back on it, the biggest thing is probably pornography use. Um, at the time, I had really cut back on it because of my relationship. I had sort of made a commitment to myself,
Hmm.
but over time, it crept back into my life. You know, it's hard to get rid of a lifetime habit very quickly. So yeah, pornography definitely wasn't serving me. Um, I would say in general, I kind of lived without much of a life purpose or plan in general, and that kind of had me meandering, scrolling social media, trying to find, you can almost call them just diversions to make myself feel better. There wasn't much purpose in the things I would do. It was just like, oh, what's the next fun thing that I can do?
Hmm.
And looking back on it, I have a greater perspective on what I really enjoy in life, and I can pursue that more fulfillingly. But
So
yeah,
yeah, let's
yeah,
segue there. So we got
sure.
a bit of an idea of how Vlad perceived himself then
Mm.
looking back. And now tell us about what your experience of yourself in life is, especially in contrast to these particular items that you mentioned and anything else that feels pertinent.
Yeah, yeah. So the best way that I can summarize the difference between then and now is that nowadays I have a sense that I am okay, that life is okay, the things I enjoy are great, that I deserve to enjoy them, and that I don't have to necessarily change myself or do more.
Mm,
It was that was a big part of the way I felt, several years ago was this, am I doing enough with my life? There was a sort of like mental pressure, internal mental pressure that would just have me rethinking things I did. It's like a lack of confidence, if you want to put it in uh, simple terms. But yeah, I would say I'm more capable of enjoying the things that I am good at, and I'm also more capable to explore things I don't know.
mm.
There's greater curiosity. There's more desire to explore. I don't have a sense of failure as I did. Let me rephrase that. I don't have a fear of failing if I do try something new.
So
And
more curiosity, more openness, more. Did you mention something about your purpose and path in life?
yeah, yeah. So I've really come to terms with the things that I'm good at and the things that I enjoy. For example, for ever since college, I've been a programmer. I've really enjoyed it. Uh, I've professionally worked as a software engineer and intend to do so in the future. But for a long time, I was at odds with it. There was something that uh, didn't sit well with me about it. And it was kind of like a love hate relationship. And especially recently, over the last half year, I've I've really come to terms with the fact that I'm really good at this thing and actually really enjoy it. And I think it's the curiosity and willingness to learn that has allowed me to come to that conclusion.
Mhm.
If I can summarize that, it's like prior, I was very closed off. I wasn't open to new ideas, wasn't open to learning. And then through working with you, through our journeys, the new life experiences, I sort of opened up to, wow, like all these things that I previously feared are actually possible for me, whether it's learning something or teaching others or holding a certain position or showing up in a certain like
Mhm.
leader type of way. So
And how
yeah,
about your relationship to pornography, as well as your relationship to women in your family?
yeah, those are big ones. So I'm going to address those separately. So let's address the pornography first. So the first conclusion that I've come to is there's really nothing wrong with me for having been caught by the trap pornography.
Mm,
It's a genuine trap. And in a lot of ways, it's the human condition to, if you discover something like pornography at a young age, you can't just will yourself out of it, unfortunately. You're either going to need help, you're going to need perspective changes. So the first thing I've realized is I don't have to beat myself up about it.
mm,
It's a habit, just like any other that I've picked up through my youth. And being kind to myself about it and accepting that it's a part of me to some extent, but over time it tends to decrease. So coming to those terms has been very helpful. Uh, and yeah, it just doesn't seem like as big of a deal anymore. I would My previous pornography use years back would come with a lot of shame, sort of self hate to some extent, to where I would say like I can't believe I'm doing this again. I regretted that so much. Yeah, there was this It's like a like once again like a love hate type of relationship. It's this habit that I keep doing, but I hate myself for doing it.
So it's like a new awareness around it and the parts of you, I might say, that are engaging with it. Does that really make sense for you?
Yeah, yeah, definitely a new awareness. A lot. You often like to say the phrase, "You have a new relationship with something." Yeah, it's really a different way of seeing something that I partake in or enjoy, or in this case, at this point, very occasionally partake in, but don't beat myself up about it because I've come to the realization is I can actually evaluate, is this having like real long-term harm and am I improving in the long term? Because that's really the game. I can't, like I said, I can't hope to stop a particular habit that I've done for a long time just like that. That's I don't think that's feasible for most, you could say, addictions or
So a healthier relationship, which to you feels like progress
Mhm.
towards something better, something more useful to you in your life.
Yeah, yeah, definitely something more useful. Um, I will say in general, I still hold the belief that pornography at large doesn't have much utility for me personally. Uh, but yeah, there just isn't this strong polarity about it anymore.
Mhm.
You know, I'm going to partake in it, but I'm going to hate myself for it. There's none of that later aspect. If I do partake in it, it's like, yeah, I did that and I own it.
Mhm.
There's no like denial of, you could call it in parts where I'm not like shutting that part out that enjoyed it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so what of your relationships to women? Because you mentioned earlier on it was your initial relationship with your partner in the beginning that kind of catalyzed some of the depressive episodes and like
Mhm.
mental struggle you were having. So I'm curious how your relationship with that relationship and with women in general has evolved. And if after that, you want to speak a bit to your relationship with your family.
Yeah. Yeah. So to my relationship with women, it's fair to say that porn has shaped my relation to women in many ways growing up, because that is the way I was exposed to sexuality and how is it that men treat women? Is it this sometimes even violent or emotionally distant scenes that you see in pornography? Is that the reality of things?
Mm.
And uh, I've come to realize that no, it's not. By meeting and interacting with men like you, for example, who I believe have a quite a healthy relationship with the feminine, I've come to realize that no, this is not a regular thing. This is not how women are treated. This is not what sex life is like. Um, Women are not objects for a camera or for some act like they are in pornography.
Mhm.
Um, and so over time, that perspective for me has shifted to where, yeah, it's just less influenced by porn. I feel like I I can see other aspects of women that are not just physical. That's very important. I feel like porn really drives that.
I do remember in our earlier coaching sessions, a lot of your, let's say, strategy towards dating was to find out like how to impress a woman, how to win her over. And
Mhm.
underneath that was this drive for sex and
Yeah,
validation through sex.
yeah, yeah. So thank you for bringing that up. That speaks to the point that uh, in my younger years, my perspective of relationships was very sex heavy. It's like, oh, like this is the point of a relationship. Can't possibly be something like emotional support
Mhm.
or having a genuine connection or having great conversations or having companionship. It was more like, oh, it's like this physical thing. And that's very important. And um, that did affect, the very first relationship I had, or kind of clouded my view of what is it like to be in a relationship. But, over time, that's shifted more towards, yeah, sex is a beautiful thing and it's something you can enjoy. But it doesn't necessarily define a relationship, you
Mhm.
know? So yeah, my perspective has really shifted there. And I
It's
think,
something I want to speak to there. In general, my work with men, that we find that in the world today, with the programming out there, the way that we're taught to be men, largely through pornography, and the way that men, adult men, are portrayed in the popular media, most men have to deal with this feeling that we get our self-worth as men when we're given sex. Like it's something that we are here to provide or to earn. And so many men are approaching the world of dating with like sex in mind, that being the major goal. And when we don't get it, or when we feel rejected, which is the woman's job, we put ourselves out there to like court to win a woman. And when we get rejected, we feel like we aren't worthy of offering this thing that we have. Whereas getting used to being rejected is a big part of the game of becoming a mature man.
mhm,
I'm also reminded of another pattern that we were discussing around your relationship in retrospect, was around boundaries
mhm,
and how you notice you were people pleasing,
mhm.
trying to do everything to keep her happy
Yeah,
rather than holding your own ground and getting what you want. Can you say on that?
yeah, that is very much the case. So, uh, the thing that really comes to mind about that is, first of all, I genuinely did not have the skills to express boundaries or to express what I want. And I feel like underlying that, even more importantly, I genuinely did not know what it is that I wanted. So, yeah, if I even if I could express a boundary or a desire, it's like I don't even have those. Like, what am I about? What do I care about in this world? What do I value? What are my principles? I feel like that underlies that discussion, and there's actually another aspect to it where, for a long time, I had a view of women that was kind of putting them on a pedestal. And I feel like that contributed to the people pleasing, the inability to step away when I felt like something wasn't for me or something didn't feel right. I would really run myself ragged, uh, whether it's spending time with family, that's her family, attending events that I didn't really want to attend. It was like, oh, we're doing this together
Mhm.
type of thing. So yeah, it's a combination of not really knowing what is it that I stand for and want, and two, yeah, just having a view of women that is, oh, this is someone I need to like look up to some extent, like I need to please.
Something to
Yeah,
prove.
yeah,
Yeah.
something to prove. Yeah. I'm actually glad you say something to prove because that reminds me of the idea of, hey, like I need to prove that I can have your love or your approval
Mhm.
because otherwise I'm going to break down and I'm incomplete in some way. And I certainly had episodes like that, like looking back on it back in 2021. So,
Okay.
yeah.
So let's now hear a bit more about how your relationship with your parents has changed. What's most noticeable there?
Yeah. So I'll give a little bit of context on my relationship with my parents a few years back. So, back in 2017, when I first graduated from college, I had the opportunity to leave home. I had lived with my parents in Brooklyn for ever since we moved to the US. And I was so happy to get away. I was willing to go anywhere. I wanted nothing to do with them. I was like, I'm going to be as far away from my mom and dad as possible. It was even almost like a cutting off type of thing, like not interacting as much.
Mhm.
Uh, so, yeah, I wanted nothing to do with them going back to, my college years. Especially my dad was had a really kind of, for me, painful relationship where we didn't interact a lot. He didn't really teach me. Like I can't remember anything that he taught me, unfortunately. But
Mhm.
so here's the upshot of it all. Over time, I've gained a lot of perspective on my parents' lives. I've gained perspective on what their childhoods have been like, what their parents were like, what they went through, what experiences they've had within their relationship. And I've come to a place of great compassion for what they've experienced. And just to give a little bit of background there, they grew up in Soviet Uzbekistan, um, under a Soviet system. And having spoken to my grandma about this,
In your recent trip, right back home?
yes, I recently went home, back to Uzbekistan for the first time since I was a child.
Mm.
And that gave me a lot of perspective on the human condition of, you could say, like ethnically Russian people in a lot of ways. Like there's a lot of alcohol present within my ancestry, a lot of alcohol, a lot of, I think by modern standards, you would call like a relationship, like abuse in relationships, fighting, uh, inattentive parenting, you could say.
Like distant and remote parents.
Yeah, distant remote parents, even hostile sometimes. Like I think of, this goes back really far, but I talked to my grandma about her childhood, and I mean, her parents were violent and they divorced when she was young, and her dad was a heavy drinker and had kids with many different women.
Hmm.
Um, and I think somewhere along the line, I think it was my grandma's father. He like died young by being stabbed. And this is all to say that my ancestry here is filled with quite a lot of trauma and a lot of events that have shaped my parents' behavior, their parents' behavior. Okay. Let me pull it back to gain a lot of perspective there. And I've gained a lot of compassion for the way my parents are. And let's say my dad's dad wasn't a great dad, as far as I could tell, based on the conversation I've had with my dad. And he had a hard time growing up himself. And it begins to explain why he is or was the way he was. Yeah, to summarize, I've gained a lot of compassion, understanding, and perspective on my parents' childhoods, grandparents' childhoods, and so on. And I've come to realize they're very much products of what they've been through. And so they've kind of, in a way, passed that on to me through their parenting. But luckily, I'm in a place where I can recognize that.
Mm.
I recognize things don't have to be the same. I can change.
Yeah.
So
And aren't you considering moving back to New York to be closer to them now?
yes, yeah. This is a it's a fairly recent development where I've visited New York, Brooklyn, New York specifically, where I grew up from about the age of 6, and I've had a really wonderful time. I've really enjoyed being around my mom, my sister, interacting with my dad to some extent, but a little bit less. There's still some stuff there for me.
That'll be the thing between sons and fathers. It's going to be harder.
Yeah. Um, yeah, I really felt like I've been a mature presence for my mom, my sister. I've My perspective on the place I grew up in has changed. I'm able to enjoy the parks, the streets that I previously thought were hostile and to some extent violent. Yeah, I've gained a new relationship with the place where I grew up, and a lot of it has to do with my parents being there, my family, and I feel like being close to them is very important. And I want to be able to eat my mom's delicious cooking, and
Yeah.
do things with my sister, like pickleball with her and so on. Yeah, nothing really beats blood family, I feel like, or at least that's the conclusion I'm coming to nowadays.
Yeah, there's definitely something to that. There's a common saying out there when it comes to those who want to develop themselves spiritually or any form of personal development. They say, "Oh, you think you're enlightened? Go spend a weekend with your family." And they say that because family really is the most challenging terrain to put to practice the things that we've learned about ourselves and about life, because of all people, they have this idea of who you are, right? And so they're going to trigger you in those ways. They're going to try to pull you back into those old patterns, those old parts of you. And simply showing up, like Vlad has mentioned several times, with compassion and understanding is really the best way forward. I know at first I was, proselytizing and evangelizing all my work with psychedelics, even before it was very conscious. And no one hears that, but it's how you show up. It's
Hmm.
the presence that you bring. And above all things, I feel and believe that if this work can bring you closer to your family and you want to spend more time with them, that's a really great sign. So now we've got an idea of where Vlad started and where he is now. And now we're going to go into storytelling mode. I want you, in however way it feels pertinent or fun, particularly fun to you, to tell the story of what has happened since we met up until
Sure.
now that has cultivated this change in you.
Sure. Yeah. Um, I just feel like I want to say one thing to what you just spoke to, the proselytizing that you did, and what I actually want to address is so-called being in the psychedelic closet.
Yeah.
I really want to just back what you just said about it's about the way you show up. It's not about what you tell people you're doing,
That's right.
right? For a long time, when I started my work with psychedelics, I was very not just hesitant, but totally blocked off from telling other people about it. It was a very secretive thing. Uh, Maybe one or two people in my life knew about it. Uh, I didn't tell my then girlfriend that I was microdosing mushrooms regularly. I kept that a secret, which actually contributed to more pain. But uh, I, when I began to show up as a more mature and uh, like developed, you could say, individual to my parents, to my family, is when I was able to confidently say that.
That's a keep talking.
Uh,
It'll catch back on.
okay, yeah, I was able to confidently say, "Hey, this is something that I've been partaking in, and it's made a big change in my life," without any fear of like backlash, without any
Mm,
fear of being told, "Oh no, what are you doing? Taking drugs or something like that."
uh-huh.
There was this confidence and knowing that here's how I show up now. Here's what has made a big difference for me. And frankly, you can take it how you want. I'm telling you my truth, and that's that. If this is something you're interested in, I can tell you more about it.
Hmm.
But if you're not, that's okay. That can be the end of that discussion. We can talk about something
Yeah.
else. So yeah, it's really the way you show up. Yeah, going around telling people, "Oh yeah, I just did this or that, and it's made such a big change in my life," but you're still the same person.
Hmm.
That doesn't do it.
And now here you are in the middle of a jungle on top of a mountain,
Yeah.
surrounded by people who are psychonauts and advocates of psychedelic medicine and plant medicine and all sorts of esoteric spiritual practices. So tell us the story of how you
Yeah,
ended up
yeah,
here.
yeah. Okay. So yeah, it's been quite a journey. So I'll go back to 2021 again. I at the time did my very first series of ketamine infusions at a clinic in Scottsdale, Arizona. And that kind of was the beginning point for okay, there's something to this stuff, to these medicines. I felt a certain joy and excitement about life that I didn't know was possible to feel. So I was like, holy crap, this stuff works and there's something to it, and perhaps I should pursue it more. A year went by. I went back to the same clinic once again for a second series of infusions. And this time I had kind of a different goal. The first time was really, okay, I feel really crappy. How can I improve my life a little bit or a lot? Um, this time I was like, okay, uh, what more can I learn about myself? Uh, is there is there something that I should change about my life? Kind of feeling like there's something more to this whole thing. And so I went through that series of infusions with the goal of psycho spiritual development. It wasn't my goal, but it was it was what the doctors at the clinic actually said. Oh yeah, sounds like you want to do some psychospiritual development. I said, sure.
That sounds good.
I had no idea what spirituality was or what it entails or uh, at the time I was just like, yeah, sounds good to me. Whatever makes my mind gives me a healthier mind and a better mental health.
Yeah.
So that's when I first met you. You were assigned to be my
Integration
integration
coach.
coach
Hmm.
at Advanced Wellness and Pain, and uh, yeah, I went through the infusions, and to some extent, our sessions were kind of just like, yeah, I'm doing great, things are good. I remember you saying, yeah, you got a real everything is okay vibe, as you said that to me, and yeah, so I went through that, and then I think very soon after, within a matter of a month, you were in Phoenix doing mushroom journeys, facilitating mushroom journeys. And I said, hey, let's do it. I've done ketamine. This should be interesting. It'll be nothing new, probably same thing as these other experiences I've had. And then, you show up in my house. I'm like, who's this guy walking barefoot? Why has he got a drum and this whole thing? I'm like, I have no idea what's coming. He asked me if I want to, how strong do I want to dose? 1 to 7. I'm like, 1 to 7. Give me a 7. Uh, yeah, I had a real strong. If somebody offered me more of something, I would always say yes at the time, and this
Yeah.
went on for some more time. But yeah, we did that mushroom journey, and it is absolutely mind blowing. Um,
Just for like context too, like we're in his bedroom. I set up an altar on like his computer desk. I just make do with what's there. Someone wants to do the work, I show up. And I was pretty much just holding space from at the foot of his bed, just sitting down there. And yeah.
yeah, yeah, it was an interesting setup, something so totally novel for me. It was actually quite scary. I was quite scared a few at a few moments where I was like, "What is going on right now?"
I mentioned that moment where you popped up and I was like, you saw
Uh,
me.
yeah, like the mushrooms are coming on, and I was starting to feel this a variety of sensations that I had never felt before. And I like sit up because I maybe I heard a noise or something, and kind of like setting up candles for like for light. So there's a nice scenery when the journey's over and stuff.
And you don't want bright light during these journeys.
Yeah, yeah. And I asked you, uh, I hope you're not doing something you shouldn't be doing, or I told you that. I remember I literally told you that. You were wearing a hood. You had put on this
A poncho.
yeah, like a poncho.
Now it's
And
missing. I lost it at Burning Man,
uh,
unfortunately.
well,
Yeah, I
that
was sitting there, the hood was on, and he hadn't seen me in this before. And this was a good feedback for me not to change my appearance so drastically in the middle of a journey.
yeah, that kind of freaked me out. I was like, oh shit, what is happening? Am I gonna like die here or something? That genuinely crossed my mind. But anyway, I'm like, you said something to me. You said, yeah, it's because you care. I remember you saying that. At the time, I took that the wrong way, actually, but I laid back down. I understand now what you meant at the time.
Hmm.
You meant that, yes, I care. I care about where I am. I care for my safety. I care that I'm being taken care of, and so on.
Hmm.
And there was a perception that perhaps I wasn't. Um, but when you said that, I thought that was like a mocking thing, like, oh, you care? Yeah, you care. That's kind of how I took it. This gives you some perspective on my mentality back then that sort of other people, when they made comments like that they were sarcastic and they were somehow meant to poke fun at
Yeah,
something.
like, would you say you weren't used to receiving like genuine feedback like that? That was honest.
Yes,
Yeah.
I was not at all. No. Um, but yeah, that was an interesting encounter. And then, so I laid back down. I think I laid down through the rest of that journey. And that was the most mind blowing experience at the time of I've ever had at the time. I mean,
Very different than ketamine.
oh, very different, very different, very somatic. I felt like I was freezing at one point. I cried my eyes out for a while there. I had flashbacks of various memories. I'd just broken up with my girlfriend, and I had all these feelings about her family, how I ended it. And it was like reliving so many parts of my life, like re-experience them, and feeling very strong, visceral, emotional responses to those memories that I probably hadn't felt when I actually experienced those things.
Mhm.
And
So things changed a bit after that for you, huh? As far as your
yeah,
relationship to psychedelics, psychedelic work, what it could do, what it could mean.
yeah, yeah. I still wasn't really like fully sure what it all meant, but all I knew was that all of a sudden I felt better. Like the day after, the weeks after, I just felt something. It's so hard to describe in words because it's a psychological or like bodily feeling. I felt better. I felt like more joy about life. Things seemed brighter, right? And you could call that like the literal, like a lessening of depression to some extent. You know, that's something mushrooms are really being examined for
Hmm.
applications and things like treatment resistant depression.
Absolutely.
And I just felt better.
And that's why we microdose mushrooms for some time before this journey, not only to get him used to what being with that medicine is like, which is a lot more somatic and a lot more complex than ketamine. You know, ketamine is like a dissociative, so it brings you into a state of like neutrality, equanimity, which lets you engage with the parts of yourself that might feel anxiety or depression from like this it's okay kind of state,
Mm-hmm.
which is why it's great for entry level psychedelic work.
Yeah.
Whereas mushrooms can bring up a whole lot more. They make you feel a lot more. You can see more visually, but this
Mm-hmm.
experience is very much deeper and more complex. And
Mm-hmm.
like Vlad said, for someone's first experience, it's not uncommon to feel a massive burden lifted
Mm-hmm.
and not know exactly what it is, but you feel more like yourself, more whole, more joy, lighter.
Yeah. Small correction there. I don't believe I had microdosed at that point. Like that journey was my very first time taking mushrooms, which is why didn't know what was going to hit me or what did. But we
Oh,
ended up microdosing after beginning the
that's
microdose
right.
coaching. Um, but you're spot on with the difference between the medicines. Like with the ketamine, I had really, I did the infusions and there was a sort of peaking of mood and excitement and energy. But over time, if you don't continue the infusions, that effect drops off. It's not something as persistent. Like with the
Mm-hmm.
mushrooms, it's people often talk about Afterglow. That effect alone lasts for quite a while, where you
Yeah.
feel quite like a peak state for some time. But even beyond that, I believe there are just the psychological realizations that like I had reliving certain experiences and crying certain burdens out
You also
that
had a powerful experience with a photo of your ex-girlfriend at the time, right? Which is beside you in the bed.
I believe so. Yeah, I prepared some photos. Um, yeah, that whole trip was that was like the thing that was most alive for me at the time.
Mm-hmm.
A breakup that happened like that. I mean, we went from uh, about at the time, almost a year of dating where we were very close. We were like that to I ended the relationship, I mean, in like an hour. Looking back on it, it's amazing that I was capable of doing that.
Yeah.
And I certainly wouldn't do something. There's a lot of things that I've done that I would redo if I could, but or rather that I would do differently now if it was really the way for me to go. But there was a lot there that you could say was suppressed, a lot of emotions. Like I don't really give proper weight to what that relationship what meant for me. And
And I would
so,
say having had that experience shortly before the mushroom journey, it helped you really feel everything that was happening because of it.
yeah, yeah, it was a lot of heavy emotions. And I feel like that contributed to a powerful journey and a greater unburdening and a greater ability to forgive myself for things that I had done that I could not undo.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Like
Mm-hmm.
any pain that my actions had inflicted, you can never take things like that back. But what you can do is you can forgive yourself. And I
Yeah.
feel like that really speaks to the arc of my journey in a lot of ways is self-forgiveness and compassion for myself, which then extends to other people as well.
Right.
Like I just spoke about my parents. Yeah, realizing we're all fallible human beings and we can't do what we don't know how to do, what we
That's it.
haven't been taught,
There's
what
so
we don't have the
much.
skills for.
And that's a really powerful realization because there's so much that we're given without choice when we're born into these lives from parents that had grandparents, that had parents, that had grandparents, just holding on to so much trauma
Mm-hmm.
and being so disconnected from practices like this that help us let go of this pain and these burdens. We've lost touch with that for so
Mm-hmm.
very long. And so it's not uncommon if you're the first person from your family to strike out and seek growth and healing like
Mm-hmm.
this. A lot can show up and it's not all yours. So one of the most important things you can do at first is just to like accept it and show compassion towards it, be curious about it. Because exactly what it is not going to be made clear to you at first. And this is why like ongoing integration work is really helpful.
Mm-hmm.
So since that journey, you had many other journeys,
Yeah.
other mushroom journeys, MDMA journeys, most recently, some new journeys. And where do you want to go with that?
Yeah. So we did that mushroom journey in 2021. I believe the very next experience that I had, which was once again with you. So we began the microdosing coaching
Yeah.
and just
And by the way, we don't need to go chronologically. We
okay,
can cover like what's most
okay,
impactful and
okay,
noticeable to you. Like one
okay.
of my questions I want to be sure that we get to is, and we covered this first one, which I'm sure was
Mhm.
significant,
Yeah,
but like overall, what would you say like the most impactful and significant journey has been so far?
yeah. Okay, I'm glad you asked that because chronologically that actually lines up with the next journey that we did, which was it was August of 2022. It was in Flagstaff with you and another man named Joshua,
Mhm.
where I took MDMA for the first time. And I think back to that experience and I feel like it shaped the rest of my journey until now because that was in many ways a breakthrough experience for me, MDMA. During that journey, I experienced a level of self love and self compassion that I had never felt before.
Yeah.
Especially surrounding my self image, my body image, my physical appearance. Uh, yeah, it was this level of this realization that I don't, I am okay as I am. And I spoke to this at the very beginning of this conversation, but that's kind of when that started. I don't think that idea had landed yet prior, but MDMA really gave me that.
Mm,
And I spent most of that journey like feeling my body, feeling my
right.
abdomen,
Yeah.
a place where I have held a lot of tension throughout my life, kind of like staying flexed,
Yeah.
kind of like
The
wanting to,
image.
yeah, like wanting to have the appearance of having abs, which is very important for me. Um, because I grew up kind of trying to, in high school, I started lifting weights, and a lot of the people that I looked up to, like via the internet and YouTube, are bodybuilders. I'm like, oh, I want to be like this person. I want to get big and strong so uh, I can impress people. I can prove something. I can lift this weight, or I can have this big biceps or biceps that are this big. And so my abdomen really suffered through that, where I would just hold a lot of tension. I spent that journey massaging it, feeling my body, like feeling even like my body hair,
Hmm.
which I didn't really have a good relationship with at the time. And yeah, that led to like massages working through this tension that I got following that journey.
Yeah, you had a regular like massage therapy practice afterward with the practitioner for some time, right?
Yeah, yeah. I started getting massages with at the beginning even a focus on my abdomen that I had held so tensely for so very long. Um, so yeah, the most profound experience, I have to go back to that one as sort of the launch pad for the rest of my, you could say, healing and psychological improvement and development. So that addresses that question and my experiences. Should I continue with further experience or anything?
Yeah, I'll just make a quick note that MDMA is very reliable in the experience it produces, similar to what Vlad just explained. It brings us into a state of complete self-love, peace, and acceptance for who we are and for what we are. Partly because it shuts down the amygdala, which is a place that we experience fear from. But in addition, the extra serotonin, the dopamine, the oxytocin, the endorphins, they fill you with this profound sense of love. And some would say helps you understand like your wholeness and like the God within or the source within, that we are everything, that we can hold ourselves completely. And this is exactly why it's been so effective with the MAPS trials with the FDA to cure PTSD for war vets in a matter of months. Like it's like surgical psychic surgery, this kind of stuff, especially when it's paired with internal family systems therapy and a lot of parts work beforehand. But I digress. Yeah, we'll let Vlad continue the story now.
Yeah, and I want to address one more thing. You mentioned this feeling of wholeness or this feeling of source or God within. That experience was also what started like my spiritual life.
Hmm.
I'll add a caveat that I'm in a different place now, but at the time, that experience, during that experience, I had this experience, this like touching of something ethereal or godly or source like that uh, led me to like a strict, or not a strict, but a thorough meditation practice,
That's right.
to reading materials, to reading spiritual materials. I read some Anthony DeMello, started with Eckhart Tolle. Yeah, that one, there was both that psychological surgery and the spiritual aspect at the same time, which was really profound. You can have both.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
My next question would be, what has been your most challenging experience on this
Mm.
journey so far? I have a feeling where it's going to go. If not,
Yeah.
I'm going to take them
Yeah.
there.
Challenging experience. So I've had some challenging experiences, but the one that really stands out was an experience last October. So October 2023 at retreat with you, where
A
I
group retreat.
a group
Me and
retreat.
my teacher, and a blend of like elders and younger men.
Mhm. Yeah, back then I was still in this mindset of more is better, and if you offered me more, I would take more.
That's right.
Um, and that led to a situation with mushrooms where things really kind of went off the rails for me. I'm going to set the context where we're sitting with mushrooms. It's an evening journey, and most people are taking the same dose of mushrooms, pretty standardized, with the option of a booster in the middle of the ceremony. And so I take the initial dose, having a great journey, things are going well, fully visual. I even like had a conversation with your teacher at the like during the ceremony at the time. Like I briefly sat up and we like laughed about something, and so I was still very gung ho, and the booster comes around and I say, "Give me more." So I get more, and I'm sitting there and I start eating it, and I start eating it, and there's a part of me that's saying, "Should I be eating this many mushrooms?" And then another part of me says, "Yes, I should." And I ate all the mushrooms, and I think in total I definitely ate more than 10 grams of mushrooms. Definitely, like the amount that I had the second time was the same or greater than the initial dose.
I believe the first round is usually like 2 to 4 grams, and the booster is usually no much more than that. But anyway, dosing isn't everything,
Yeah,
but
yeah. This is to say that regardless of the actual number, I had more than I could handle and that I had experienced before. And my psyche was not ready for that. And neither was my nervous system or my amygdala.
Hmm.
And so the mushrooms took me to a place of what I would describe as non existence, where I was so confused. It felt like I had lost all sense of anything physical existing. So I was laying down and everything was just a concept. Like, holy crap, my boss at work doesn't actually exist. They're just a concept. And all these people I know, they're just a concept. And it was this ethereal place where I began to freak out because I thought I had disappeared from existence. I kid you not. When that happened, I attempted to regain my bearings, to reestablish where I am. Okay, let's establish the fact that I am at retreat, surrounded by other people with you, and I'm safe. But I could not do that. I would like sit up from a laying position, and the next thing you know, I would be laying down again, and there was like no transition between the two. It was like this loop of me constantly sitting up, it felt like. So I had no idea what was going on. I was just totally confused. Next thing you know, I take my eye mask off because I'm trying to understand what is happening right now.
Hmm.
I'm so gone on the mushrooms. And I start seeing things that aren't really happening. I begin to feel like I'm in danger when I totally was not. And my fight or flight system kicked in. I said, "You're not taking me alive. I'm running out of here. I'm going to escape."
Hmm.
And I ran off into the woods. I ran off into the woods,
Wait, hold on.
literally.
He had a sitter next to him the whole time too.
Oh, yeah. I forgot
And
about
I was, even though he had a sitter, one of the guardians, I was watching the whole time.
Yeah.
I saw you popping up and down a lot and like saying things like exclaiming like urgent curiosities. It sounded kind of whimsical, but I could tell you were in a place of like not making sense of things and trying to.
Yeah.
And yeah.
Yeah. There was this whimsical nature to it because I was trying to make light of the situation in
Yeah.
order to calm myself down. I literally remember saying, "We're all just taking mushrooms in the forest,"
Yep.
or
You
something like
laughed.
that, and laughing about it to calm myself, to
Hmm.
soothe myself. I'm like, okay, that's all we're doing. Nothing else is happening because I had other visions. And yeah, the man laying next to me, wonderful man. I had spent a good amount of time talking to him and learning about his life. Unfortunately, in my fight or flight state, I punched him. I decked him. I'm laying there, and when I decided to make the run, I punched and I ran.
Yeah.
And yeah, uh, yeah, that's what happened. And when I say I ran into the woods, I literally mean into the woods. I ran into the trees. I didn't just run on the path out of the location. I ran literally like into the thicket. And I remember when I first ran into it, I remember tasting wood.
Hmm.
And it was like, oh God, tumbling, doing the whole thing. Um, yeah, that as I was running through the woods, I had the most, you could say, ethereal and spiritual experience of all time. I felt that I was Buddha and that I was stuck in, I was stuck in samsara, which is the cycle of life and death that humans go through according to Buddhist canon, and I think Hindu canon as well. Um, and so there was this like, okay, if I can escape this cycle, I will become Buddha, I become enlightened. And so the way to escape that was to exit this life. And that actually contributed to me like trying to hurt myself in the woods, bash my head a few times, trying to say like, okay, just accept the fact that I'm going to transcend this life and go somewhere else. But it was so difficult. I was not able to do it. I was not able to just transcend. And what was really happening was my body was keeping me alive. It was saying like, yeah, this is not. You're
Hmm.
not gonna be able to drown yourself. Like that's physiologically, you can't just like you're not gonna be able to put your face in this river and just breathe it in, breathe the water in and die. Like that's not happening. Thank, I thank my body for that. It's wonderful.
Uh-huh.
Um, the reality is this was quite a dark thing that was happening. I'm speaking of it very lightly right now, but it was quite serious, and I did try to hurt myself really badly. It was simultaneously easily the most out there experience I've had. Um, And I think at some point I ran out of steam. I ran out of steam of trying to get away or run, and I had hit myself on the head enough times to where I'm like, okay, I'm just gonna give up. And I just lay there, face down, and the mush started to come down a little bit, coming back to my senses, and I'm still totally paranoid, right? I'm thinking somebody's gonna find me, they're gonna capture me and bring me back to hurt me. And
Capture because you thought you were escaping from us because we were dangerous.
correct,
Yeah.
yeah, I thought you were gonna capture me. And uh, so I'm laying there, and I hear like a search party like yelling, like, "Hey, Vlad, like we're trying to help you." And in my state of paranoia, I hear that you're trying to help me. I'm like, yeah, you're just trying to like lure me in. That's all was my understanding, my perception of that.
Uh-huh.
As the search party is going, I believe it was you and the
Yeah.
other man that I punched.
Yeah.
Um,
You did respond at one point though. And it was like perfect timing because we were searching for some time. And at one point I'm like, I don't know. I'm just gonna head back and regroup, come up with another strategy. But that last time I called out, you responded.
yeah,
And I followed like the river, the water it towards you, like
yeah,
rather than going across it, like into the stream.
uh-huh.
And we found you there.
Yeah. I had gotten to a point where I had landed face down, and I had totally just like given up. I was like, okay, it's either you capture me or I might lay here and die. So
Mhm.
that's fine. Just take me. At least I'll be all right for now. And so yeah, I responded. You found me. I was still totally delusional.
Yeah.
So I thought I genuinely did not think you were there to help me. Uh, but anyway, you got me back in shape. You gave me the fire starter on the toes,
Right.
your
Yeah.
hands.
We warmed him up. We brought him back. We gave
Yeah,
him the space to sleep by himself. I slept next to him the whole
yeah,
night. In the morning, he got patched up, loved on by the guys. Someone even took him to the hospital to get some of the stitches,
yeah,
some
yeah.
stitches.
And the night that happened, as I was laying there as I sobered up, it hit me what just happened. It hit me what I had been delusional about.
Yeah. Yeah. There was a big lesson in this for you. Yeah.
Yeah,
Let's go there.
yeah. There was a huge lesson in trusting, especially trusting other men. Yes, this segues great into the idea that I'd grown up really not trusting other men, uh, believing that I'm all right for now. But yeah, growing up with a lack of trust for other men, partly due to my dad, I would say, partly due to some childhood bullying in school. There was this there was this perception in me that other men are out to either get one over on me or hurt me in some way or to be superior over me, and that really came through hard during like the delusional phase of this whole thing. And as I laid there, I said, holy crap, you were just trying to help me all this whole time. And that was entirely a figment of my imagination. So you spoke to what happened the next day. Next day was end of the retreat. We all were scheduled to head out from the location. And I was taken care of so well by the other men that were there. It was three other men that, first of all, accompanied me to the hospital, drove me there. One of them stayed with me throughout my visit there, gave me a hotel room, a place to stay at for the night near the hospital, so I didn't have to go to my Airbnb and drive
Mhm.
some distance. And that experience was so tremendously healing. Right? A lot of times, the meaning we make of our experiences is what really shapes the outcome. Right? If I had, let's say, been left to just my own devices or left to suffer on my own, could have easily been construed as, oh, when I suffer, I don't deserve help, all right, and I won't get it. But the complete opposite happened. I was taken care of. I also, yeah, I was taken care of, and yeah, even like the night after and the night after that, I had these wake up at night with this vision of figures standing over me, watching over me. They were shaped like man statues, like statues of men, kind of like you'd see at maybe like old Chinese temples
Hmm.
and like guardians. Uh, And that helping make
That's right.
meaning
Heard
out
about
of
that.
that experience. Yeah, the experience itself was undoubtedly one of suffering, of actually like running into the forest, doing the punching, all that. But what followed was much more important, actually.
I mean, something did die there. Some part of you that was holding on to this belief that men aren't safe, that you can't trust them.
Yeah.
So I noticed a big change in you afterwards, especially in how you were leaning more into like your men's community, in the
Mhm.
Phoenix area and getting more involved with them. So to wrap up
Yeah.
this part of the story, I wanted him to share this because there's sort of a patterning out there in the work where people don't share stories like this, where it gets hard, where it can be dangerous. And despite how safe it is and how much preparation there is, these things can happen. We have completely full, thorough intakes. We have like 3 different people, both facilitator, guide, and sitter there. And these things can happen. So, based on what Vlad said, the takeaway is, and this is something I find missing in a lot of these experiences, it's the community in the end
Mhm.
that takes care of you, that shows up. They don't judge, they don't shame, and they just show up and they surround you and they love you. And then they're with you for the weeks, months afterward to continue to make meaning out of it.
Mhm.
And it does take a certain level of like commitment to chase a man into the woods, to wrap him in blankets and to bring him back, you know? And that was a really powerful lesson for me as well. Because I know going into this work, I got to be a yes to whatever needs to be done to take care of people. And that for me was a really powerful growth experience because, you know, some people went out to look for you for some time before that and they just weren't, I could tell they weren't really into it. Like they weren't going into the dark. They weren't going into like the far off places. And I'm like, fuck it, I'm gonna put my warrior hat on. Like I'm marching into the woods in like the middle of the night, and like I'm gonna find this man one way or another. I knew I would, and I was kind of scared too. But that's the kind of attitude you need to do this work and to provide.
Yeah. Yeah, I want to speak to that part some more. Spoken to it a bit before, but the preparation and the integration aspect of medicine work and for journeys is, I feel like, just as important, if not even more important. I've heard Gabor Mate say things like, healing happens in relationship. Um, a lot of times, the relationship you develop with the people you're going to journey with or the guy that you're going to work with is the basis for the journey. It really informs how the journey goes.
Mm-hmm.
When you go to a dark place or a scary place, do you have enough trust in the person that's with you to be able to hold that, to be able to, if you want to speak about it, to speak to you about it in a way that soothes and does not make it worse, right? That's very important. Um, it's important to have follow-ups for any sort of journey work. I'm 100% clear on that. And working with you, that's been a very key part of every journey we've done. So yeah, that is as important as the actual medicine that you're sitting with and the actual process on the day of when you dose, when you go through the whole experience.
Yeah. And also worth mentioning, we weren't simply gathering to take mushrooms and take MDMA. There was a lot of programming and teaching and exercises throughout these days to learn about the ways of men, the mythology of masculinity over time, and to develop more trust and rapport like within the group in that container. And so there's one more story I'd like to capture
Mm-hmm.
in this little podcast interview today, and it's the most recent one.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a lot of curiosity around it because we've yet to even engage in the full-on like integration and unfolding of it yet.
Mm-hmm.
Your first LSD journey a few days ago.
Yeah, I took LSD on Sunday, which Yeah, that was 2 days ago, 2 nights ago, and had honestly, I would call the most psychedelic of all my psychedelic experiences thus far. And most importantly, it was a journey without any difficulties, without any parts that were challenging or fearful or anxiety inducing. Yeah, it was a combination of the classical like LSD imagery, lights, melting away into the sounds of the music, uh, a feeling of vibration, like I am once again one with the music. Um, there was also this period of great expansiveness where it felt like my body had opened up to become so much larger than it really is.
And you were fearless in that state, I remember,
Yeah, I was completely fearless
and
for a
laughing the whole
lot of that
time. A lot
journey.
of joy.
Yeah, I had, especially at the beginning, I was like so giggly. Everything was just, there wasn't anything that was specifically funny, but I was just wanting to laugh at absolutely everything. But there was that part where I really opened up. It was like, holy crap, I have never been this simultaneously relaxed but engaged at the same time. It was like there was nothing that scared me.
Hmm.
And I felt so, the best word is open.
Open in a way you hadn't experienced in other psychedelics before.
It's so hard to, really recall if I felt like that before because these feelings are so fleeting, but
Mhm.
I don't think so. I don't think so.
So, what do you feel like you're taking from that experience?
Um, yeah, so I think the big thing I'm taking away is so with that openness and that expansion came the lessening of certain like, psychological pressure. It's
Hmm.
hard to it's hard to describe it. It's just like a felt thing. I feel like there's less weighing down on me. I feel lighter, feel less burdened in some way.
Well, you mentioned a lot of tingling, right?
Yeah.
There might have been something happening, some sort of energetic release. Many times with this work, sometimes with LSD, usually always with MDMA, there's what we call somatic release. And so I always preface beforehand, if you notice yourself shaking, like don't get scared. It's not a seizure. This is your body experiencing a place of safety. And when the body feels safe, it knows what to let go of. And just
Mhm.
like when animals get into a tiff and they run off, they shake. This is how they process and release. And so I'm imagining there was something happening there because that tingling, the vibration was concurrent with your experience of feeling like open
Mhm.
and safe and like big.
Yeah.
And there was something there about maybe being able to be this open, take up this much space, and
Mhm.
releasing some fear around taking up that much space.
Yeah.
Just my 2 cents.
No, 100%. Those were definitely concurrent. And there was something to the physical expansion as well, where I was taking up literally a lot of physical space
Yeah, he was a
that
starfish.
I probably wouldn't otherwise do in other circumstances, where like I want to make sure other people have enough space. But I was like,
That's right.
no, fuck it. I'm expanding all the way. Like I'm gonna stretch my limbs out as far as I can possibly go. And if I hit something, well, so be it. You know, it's an interesting that's an interesting thing because yeah, like I'm generally fairly reserved with stepping into other space. I tend to be kind of a little shy about it. I try not to take up too much space. But doing that, there was something about it and the shaking. I remember talking to you about it where I was like overwhelmed by the amount of energy I had. It's like, Kyle, I feel like the entire, like I'm the size of the world right now. Um,
Do you remember what I said in response to that?
I remember you telling me like work with it, like try to see if you can like do something with that energy, but
I think at one point too, I said, feels good, doesn't it?
yeah,
That's pretty cool.
yeah,
Well,
yeah.
that's another great point too. This is another common sort of burden most of us carry is like not feeling like we can actually take up space where we
Mhm.
are. And that suppresses our expression and the sharing of our truth. Hey,
Mhm.
bud. And yeah, I see that a lot in this work too.
Yeah.
Boundaries, people pleasing, taking up space. It's a common theme.
I want to say one more thing that just hit me. So as a child growing up, I really did my best to not take up a lot of space. when I grew up with my parents, I often tried to avoid my dad at home, and I would like stay in my room. If I heard him outside, like in the kitchen or in the living room, I would intentionally not do my best to not leave my room unless I totally had to. And when I did do it, I would really make myself quick about it because I didn't want to be addressed by him, sometimes drunk, you know.
Hmm.
I just didn't want to be in that presence. So I would try to not put myself in it. I would try to make myself small.
There you go. And which might
Wow.
also be related to why you felt the need to work out so much and be big and protect yourself.
As I said, I got goosebumps
Goosebumps.
with that
That's when you know
realization.
the truth. Body knows. It responds.
Okay.
Yeah, we'll be unpacking more about
Yeah.
this in the weeks to come since it was a recent journey. But
Yeah.
I was just delighted that you had so much fun. And I also noticed like this experience you were having of enjoying the space. And so I wasn't in the space
Hmm.
because were I in there, even if I was simply holding space, I'd be a part of it.
Hmm.
And this is something important to note around transference and countertransference. Even though I didn't know this part of the story that Vlad shared, I could see he was having an experience of enjoying taking up space. So I removed myself from the space, knowing that it could only help. Now it's still within earshot, and he was
Hmm.
loud enough for me to know what was going on. Um, so amazing.
Yeah. I told you that if I needed something, I would scream.
Yeah. And I'm like, I'm sure you will.
I just yell for you. I was that energized.
And so to wrap things up, Vlad, if you had to give any sort of feedback or advice to anyone who's considering working with plant medicines or psychedelics
Hmm.
to heal or grow in any way, what would you let them know?
Yeah. First of all, I would say do this with someone who is experienced. Number one, someone who is able to hold a space for these altered states, who will not run away if you're having a troubling experience. Someone will be there and sit there and comfort you if you need it. Secondly, someone you genuinely trust and have rapport with, someone that you've hopefully worked with prior to understand your prior history, what your childhood was like, where you're at in your life. Do you feel you have sufficient interpersonal relationships with other people? Do you feel held by your community? Kind of going on a tangent here, but you need to be with someone you genuinely trust. Secondly, this I think is another big one is going without expectations. Really, do not read up about what psychedelic states are like or what people have experienced because I've done this to myself where I've actually freaked myself out of having a particular experience. You're better off doing it not knowing anything, honestly. Um, and it'll lead to a more unique and profound journey, I think, without that expectation effect. Definitely prepare a lot of time if you're going to work with the medicine. These experiences are strong, and you want to be prepared for at least a few days prior. That is mentally, physically. Secondly, you want to take a lot of time following journeys to unpack what's going on. Don't make big life decisions after you do sit with a medicine.
Mm-hmm.
Don't go quitting your job right away. Really just sit with what you're going through. And
And what about the coaching relationship?
yeah, the coaching relationship. Yeah, you got to work with somebody you trust and that you know has worked with the medicine, works with other people. I feel like so in that relationship, it's really useful to have someone who has experienced similar life events, someone who has faced similar challenges. And this actually speaks to the point that as a man, it feels very important to work with a man who's a coach. I'm not really sure if there's such a thing as a man being coached by a woman. I don't know, but the life experiences between the two sexes are vastly different a lot of times.
True.
And for me, it's been big that you can speak to a lot of the things that I've been through, right? And there's a lot of commonality. Yeah.
Yeah.
That really contributes to the ability to relate.
I'll add a few more comments to wrap that up. One of the most important parts of this work, I would say the end goal of all of it, is connection and community. The only reason we ever develop addictions or coping mechanisms is because we imagine a lack of connection to something, ourselves, nature, family. And so these medicines have been used for like time immemorial in villages and tribes. And the only thing that's different now is this reality that for this little sliver of time, we've been westernized. We don't live in these sort of configurations anymore, where there's like an elder, a medicine man or woman in the community that really understands everyone and has a feeling of what's going on. And before they do this work, it's a short conversation to really understand what to actually engage with and how to be with it. And they're there with them the whole time. And so this is what the whole idea of integration coaching is about. It's to spend that time to develop a relationship with those who are curious about this work, to really get to know them beforehand, to be with them during, and to walk with them and make meaning of it afterwards. And to speak to this point that Vlad made about men working with men, this brings up this idea of the rites of passage. So in order for men to grow and to mature, which is different than women, they need to be guided by elders through certain rites of passage and initiations, which again, historically have included medicine. Women don't need that. We have known that women mature in their own energetic and fascinating way, at least fascinating to men, because we'll never quite understand the difference there. But men need men to do this. And not just because we can relate through certain arcs of our own initiation and speak to them, but because we're made differently. And so with that, yeah, Vlad, I want to say it's been such an amazing like 2+ years of working together, and I never would have imagined you'd be here in Costa Rica, like hanging out with me for 2 weeks in my cabin, and then going off on your own to see what it's like. And I'm just excited to see what the future will hold for us and for yourself and for the community that we're building.
Yeah, it's been quite a journey. Um, yeah, it's been tremendous. It's each new turn is unlike anything that one can expect.
There's expectations bit again.
Yeah. It's you never know what's going to happen next, and somehow these connections and these experiences evolve in their own natural ways, and that's how we grow. Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks for having this conversation with me. And I'm hoping you out there who watch this, that it's been helpful, insightful, enlightening in some way. I feel like these conversations and spreading awareness around this work and how to prepare for it, what it can do, is the most important thing right now. Just talking about our stories and understanding how it can go, how it can be helpful, and what constituent aspects are necessary for that. And we're learning that as we go.